Okay, guys, we are going to begin our next panel, which is the California Ports Reports with Kristine Zortman, Executive Director, Port of Redwood City, Brad Benson, Port of San Francisco, Colleen Liang, Port of Oakland, and Adrienne Newbold, Port of Los Angeles. Kristine, we're going to start with you. Good morning, Kristine.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing fine. I do want to apologize to everyone if I stumble a bit. I'm getting over a cold, but I'm happy to be here to chat and to hear
Okay.
everyone else.
So we heard this morning from Scott Humphrey about how there was a need for emergency dredging because of sudden rainfalls already this year. And you have been in the middle of that for years. And of course, I've got to ask myself, how come you can't get your emergency dredging when you need it too? But I'll let.
I ask myself that too sometimes.
Okay, Kristine, you're the executive director of the Port of Redwood City. How long have you been a director?
Going on 8 years now.
Right. Okay. Kristine, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Stas. Good afternoon. Well, no, good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about a new nature-based solution that we are looking to implement at our port. And do we have the slide deck?
Yeah, I'll put it.
Okay. Thanks, Todd. This is a presentation on a new pilot project that we are pursuing at our port. So the next slide, please. Just to give everyone a little bit of a quick orientation, so the Port of Redwood City, we are on the peninsula serving South San Francisco Bay, as well as Silicon Valley. We are primarily a dry bulk port. When you think of our port, you can think of us building Silicon Valley and South San Francisco with bringing in all of the raw construction materials into our port, as well as recycling the greater and broader peninsula area with our exports of scrap metal as well as liquid bulk recycling. And so we're about 18 nautical miles from the head of San Francisco Bay. And you can see us here on our map. One of the things that we really want to make sure that we are always a good steward of is we are surrounded by several sensitive receptors. We have the Bear Island National Fisheries and National Fish and Wildlife Service estuary, as well as Greco Island. And so several sensitive species and endangered species that inhabit those areas. Next slide, please. So we are looking at creating some nature-based solutions in areas where we have, I think, more recreational opportunities. So kind of looking at our non-cargo, our non-industrial areas. And the reason is because in the industrial areas, we are sheet piling and we are hardening our shoreline to continue those types of maritime operations. But what we recognized is there's opportunities for nature-based solutions along our recreational waterfront, which do a couple of things. It provides for educational opportunities for the community and the kids, as well as demonstrates that industry and the environment can live harmoniously with creation of intertidal habitat. So we've identified an area here, which is in our recreational area right around the corner from our marina. And these pictures kind of show you the existing shoreline that we have today. And the reason we identified this is we had a visit to the Port of San Diego back in October of 2022. And one of the things that we saw was a very, very robust nature-based solution, a living shoreline on Harbor Island that was built using e-concrete tide pools. And they had already reached success criteria, I believe, by year 2. So next slide, please. So we wanted to be able to look at an area of opportunity here at our port that kind of mimicked what they did in San Diego with hopefully being able to have success criteria in a timely fashion and really look at how we could enhance the ecosystem, create new intertidal habitat, enhance intertidal habitat, as I mentioned earlier, and then give opportunities for new maybe species that hadn't been seen in the area with the tidal pools being there. And again, focusing on the fact that if it's in an area that we've identified where the public comes, they can actually come down and see what's swimming around in the tide pools. Next slide, please. So our area of the bay, we have anywhere from plus or minus 9 feet of tidal fluctuation. So we really had to look at how we were going to fit within our shoreline and our shoreline gradients, a living shoreline that would be able to have the different bands for different quote unquote ecosystems within that intertidal habitat. And this is just a cross section of some of the areas that we had to look at our port. Next slide, please. We worked, and this is a little bit of a busy slide, but we worked with the WRA Engineering on the concept plan. To the upper right, you'll see our bandstand area where we have concerts every Saturday. To the far left is an old restaurant building that is occupied with multi-tenants now. But this area is really frequented a lot on a daily basis by the public. We have the free concerts every Saturday. We can see up to 1,000 people down here on Saturday afternoons. And so being able to do something that's great for the environment as well as provides the interpretational opportunities for the public was just something that we really like to be able to establish. And the other thing that we wanted to be able to do is as we build upon the success criteria of this project, that will allow our board then to really make policy decisions for nature-based solutions along our shoreline instead of other hardening in areas where we can, and be able to pass that on to future redevelopment of our areas. Next slide, please. So this is an example, that middle picture there, you can see some of the e-concrete tide pools that are proprietary in nature in how they're able to attract organisms for both vegetational growth as well as invertebrate growth and invertebrate population. And here are kind of just some other pictures of the kind of habitat that we want to create or enhance. Next slide, please. So this is an example of one of the tide pools that was at Harbor Island in support of San Diego. And one of the things I wanted to bring up is, you know, you think that when you see a project in Southern California that is a really feel-good project, it's a pilot project, it met success criteria within, I think, 18 months, you think, oh, let's get that into the queue up here in the Bay Area. It took us 3 years to get this through the regulatory permitting process. It wasn't as easy as someone at the state of California Fish and Wildlife calling their Southern California counterpart. No, because I don't believe that those silos have quite yet been broken. But we're working through hopefully some streamlining permitting. But we are really excited that once we get the tide pools in, we're going to see this kind of growth in the same way, at least for our climate and our region. Next slide, please. So again, we're looking at putting this pilot project in. We have made it through all of the permitting now after 3 years. We're hoping to get this out to bid in the early first quarter of 2026 so that we can meet the environmental window and get us going into success criteria. And then hopefully start making policy decisions in the future for nature-based shoreline. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Kristine. Appreciate it. And you were a minute under time.
Thanks.
We will have questions for our speakers at the end of the panel presentations. Our next speaker is Brad Benson, Waterfront Resilience Program Director, Port of San Francisco. Brad, welcome.
Thank you, Stas. Thank you, Todd, for having us today. Looking forward to the discussion. Why don't I hop right in with the slides, Todd? So I think as folks know, the Port of San Francisco has been at work on our waterfront resilience program since 2018, and we've been to prior storms, flooding, and sea level rise defense conferences to present on the program. So the be a bit of an update. Let's go to the next slide. We've got twin risks of earthquake risk and flooding along our waterfront. We completed a multi-hazard risk assessment to take a look at these problems. We found that our 100-year-old seawall could move up to 7 feet towards the bay in a larger earthquake, creating a lot of damage for not only port structures that intersect the shoreline, but major city infrastructure systems that are built right along the shoreline. On the right here, you have that bomb cyclone event from 2023. This is just south of the ferry building. It's right near where our Muni system comes from underground up onto the surface. We were a bit lucky with this, right? This was it caused some significant flooding in our creek areas, but this was at a, not a high tide, not a king tide kind of condition. And had we had the confluence of this storm with that high tide, king tide event, we would have had significant flooding across the Embarcadero. So both of these risks are current risks. People like to think of the sea level rise risk as sort of out in the future, but we have current flood risk today. Next slide, please. We've been working with the Army Corps of Engineers since 2018 to assess that flood risk, looking out over a 100-year period of analysis through 2140. And we looked at a range of sea level rise curves from 1.5 feet of sea level rise on up to 7 feet of sea level rise by the end of the century. Thinking back to that Singapore presentation from this morning, we've got a lot of reclaimed land along the San Francisco waterfront that was built at a certain elevation that will also be reclaimed. And so by 2050, our analysis shows that up to 500 buildings and assets would be damaged, including BART and Muni. And by 2140, damages could amount to up to $23 billion in today's dollars. And that really is a reason why the federal government is headed towards a federal interest finding for a project along this stretch of shoreline. If we could go to the next slide, please. I talked a little bit about that earthquake risk. We've spent a lot of time doing a geotechnical program to understand the soil characteristics along the waterfront, then to model how those soils will perform in a range of earthquakes. And then we developed a series of measures that would minimize that damage. And basically, we have to strengthen the soils. That's the major finding of this work. This work was outside of the Army Corps study, but it really did inform the recommended plan that is coming out through the study. Next slide, please. So we're grateful for this partnership. What's unique about it is that it's not just the Army Corps studying this risk along the San Francisco waterfront. We're part of the team. So we're doing half of the technical work. We've got engineers, planners, communications folks, et cetera, in there with the Army Corps experts developing the work. I'll go over the recommended plan that we've come up with. But if this study finds a federal interest, and we're expecting the study to be complete next year, the federal government would pay up to 65% of the cost. We're the lead agency for San Francisco. So this climate SF that you see on this slide, this represents the way that city departments in San Francisco are working together on climate adaptation. So as we've been working with the Corps, we've also been working with our city agency partners that manage infrastructure systems like Muni, like our San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. Next slide, please. So it's been a very long study, almost a $20 million effort over 7 years. We're nearing the end. We're headed towards Congress in 2026 in the Water Resources Development Act. Our goal is to get authorized. We're very aware of the political climate that we're in, being San Francisco. So we're not sanguine about this, but WRDA has typically been a bipartisan effort. We hope that that holds for us. If we are authorized, that would open the door to funding for design activities and then construction activities, likely lasting over about 3 decades. Next slide, please. So this is the plan that we've developed. You can see it's very high level. We're at about a 10% level of design for the coastal flood defenses. But essentially what the plan is recommending is that we elevate the shoreline, shown here in yellow, to address 1.5 feet up to 3.5 feet of sea level rise, depending on the area of the shoreline. Um, and build that with seismically strong foundations that will resist those earthquake events. Where we've got structures that intersect the shoreline, including historic buildings, those would be elevated to that new shoreline elevation. So think about the ferry building being raised 5 to 7 feet to a new elevation. In some areas of our waterfront, the shoreline's a bit higher, so the plan calls for floodproofing as the first action. This is true up in the Fisherman's Wharf area on the right-hand side of the screen. We too have been trying to really push nature-based features. The plan includes almost 3 miles of nature-based features along a human-made shoreline. We've been really lucky to work with Julie Beagle at the San Francisco district, who's a nature-based expert. And the final very complicated issue with the plan is that if we raise the shoreline to deal with higher coastal waters, we need a new way of managing stormwater. So the plan includes funding and systems to capture that stormwater and pump it to the bay. Right now, it's all gravity fed to the bay. Next slide. As we're thinking about an investment up to $13.5 billion investment, we're not just thinking about risk, we're thinking about the ways that people use the waterfront. So we want to respect our history. We want to think about transportation along the waterfront. The plan calls for rebuilding essentially the entire Embarcadero. So how are we going to approach that design and the mobility systems that people want to see along the waterfront? And basically, how do we make this investment better serve the needs of the community? Next slide. So we have worked with the Corps to enter into an agreement where the city can actually lead the next phase of design of the recommended plan. This is something that people in San Francisco felt strongly about. We know our infrastructure systems. So we've signed an agreement that will allow us to lead design with the Corps. And we're going to be doing a deeper dive into issues like transportation. Like if we're going to rebuild the Embarcadero, what will that space look like in the future? How will we manage the traffic flows that use the Embarcadero today? Next slide, please. I talked about this problem with inland drainage or stormwater management. We've been working very closely with our Public Utilities Commission. We have a combined sewer system in San Francisco, but it's only designed to manage approximately a 5-year storm. And we have much bigger storms. The stormwater flows down the streets and tries to find low points along the waterfront that are regulated discharges to the bay. Very complicated to think about how we're going to manage that combined flood risk in the future with a higher shoreline. Next slide, please. We've been thinking a lot about engineering with nature. Kristine, it was great to hear your presentation and the learning that you're doing. We'd love to talk to you about that permitting challenge. We did a living seawall pilot with the Smithsonian Institute over the last several years to look at how we can start to introduce nature even to some of those vertical features along the shoreline. Next slide, please. So, we've got an amazing waterfront today. I'm looking out at this Embarcadero area. It's just an incredible space. So we want to use this this investment to make it even better for folks. There's a lot of opportunity, including what are the uses that are going to be in the piers? Can we create new open space? Are there opportunities for major new nature-based features shown in blue here, just south of the ferry building? We're thinking about a rocky intertidal feature at that location. So a lot of opportunity with this investment. Next slide. As I mentioned, we're going to be phased, right? We're looking at a 30-year implementation period. And these are three areas that we're looking at closely for initial investment using Proposition A funding, voter approved bond funding from 2018. We're launching now a major project in Fisherman's Wharf to develop a resilient shoreline and create new open space. We've got a project in South Beach that could connect to redeveloped piers at 3032. I'm going to drill into this downtown coastal resilience project because we really think that this is the first starting point for the Army Corps recommended plan. Next slide, please. So we've got, I mentioned earlier, we have BART and Muni. We have that Embarcadero Muni tunnel connecting those systems to the surface. We're looking at this area south of the ferry building as the place where we would build a new seawall. It would be to that higher elevation, approximately 15.5 feet, NAVD 88. It would rehabilitate this agriculture building that you're seeing in this picture to the left, which is very susceptible to earthquake damage. We're looking at an engineering with nature feature at this location. So it's also an exciting area for us to think about building because we get to stay out of the Embarcadero at this location. So there's a chance of building the first segment of the recommended plan and limit disruption to people who are using the Embarcadero and surrounding neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So a lot of what is on our mind is how we're going to pay for this, even with a federal contribution. Federal funding, from what we've learned, talking to other sponsors, is periodic. Tends to come in those large bills like the infrastructure bill that passed a few years ago. So you can't count on it as a stable source of funding. And we have to come up with almost $5 billion locally to match that federal investment. So we're looking at a variety of state, local, and private sources. And I just want to dwell on the private sources. This has been the vehicle where we've actually implemented shoreline resilience in San Francisco. We've had projects at Mission Rock and Pier 70 that have elevated the shoreline. So we're really thinking those public-private partnerships are a major opportunity to develop the local funding stream. Next slide, please. So we've got big dreams of what the future waterfront can be with this level of investment. We're starting to see it emerge in some of these development projects that I've just mentioned. I think we're teeing up a multi-billion-dollar investment over the next 20 years in three highly visible areas of the waterfront, and we're excited to get started on the Army Corps recommended plan. So,
Brad, thank you very much. Excellent presentation and a lot going on, obviously, and we'll go to questions at the end. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Colleen Liang, Environmental Programs and Planning at Port of Oakland. Colleen, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Stas, for the opportunity to share what is happening at the Port of Oakland, at Port of Redwood City and Port of San Francisco. They're definitely ahead of Oakland as far as moving forward with construction of adaptation projects and a design of the work. Where we are is, as Kristine mentioned in the opening remarks, that at the airport we have addressed sea level rise by adding a couple of feet to our perimeter dike that goes around the Oakland airport. But as far as maritime and our commercial real estate areas, we really are still assessing the impacts of sea level rise. So today I'm going to provide you an update. Last year, we did present that we are moving forward with this, our planning efforts for sea level rise, as well as groundwater intrusion. But today, yes, we will present an update, but also talk about zero emission projects that are helping to reduce our carbon emissions from our operations as well. Next slide, please. So, as Kristine mentioned previously, sea level rise presents a significant threat to the Port of Oakland and, as we know, our broader region. The flooding caused by the climate change causes disruptions to our operations at the seaport and at our airport, and it could also impact the critical transportation infrastructure, our services, utilities, commercial real estate areas, and including residents along the shoreline. Many of the communities adjacent to the port or who live, stay on the slide, please, who are adjacent to the port and live along the Oakland shoreline are disadvantaged or underserved areas and are vulnerable to future extreme weather events. So it's very important for us to collaborate with these events and to plan for a resilient future shoreline. So in 2024, the port received a $3 million Caltrans grant titled the Climate Adaptation Planning for Oakland's Frontline Communities. I'm not going to keep saying that. We're going to call it CAP OFC moving forward. And the scope of this grant is to undertake detailed sea level rise modeling and develop an adaptation plan to address the associated risks. And as you can see on the right, the image on the right, our study area includes not just the port's jurisdiction, but the entirety of the Oakland shoreline. We're undertaking this work in partnership with the City of Oakland and many other regional stakeholders, which I'll go into later in the presentation, and our maritime and aviation stakeholders as well, our tenants and our community partners. Next slide, please. So as you may know, there are numerous related sea level rise planning efforts happening in the East Bay. Some are listed on the slide, but there are just way too many to name. And the port is on the steering committee of the Oakland Alameda Adaptation Committee and working on multiple planning initiatives. I want to highlight that several jurisdictions are preparing sub-regional shoreline adaptation plans under SB 272 and BCDC's Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan, which I know there will be a presentation on this later. And the CAP OFC project that's led by the port will provide critical data and information for both efforts. The port is also a stakeholder for the upcoming East Bay Crescent Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan. So there's just a lot of collaborative work going on. Next slide, please. So here is the timeline of our project. So as you can see, our work kicked off last year with reviewing previous studies and data sets and modeling efforts, gathering the key data to inform our work. We also developed an assessment of the port's construction history to better understand our flood risk. So with that information in hand, this year, our consultant team began developing flood models specific to the Port of Oakland and focusing on coastal flooding, stormwater flooding, and groundwater rise. That work is nearly complete. We were hoping to have the maps available, but they're still in draft form. So next time we present, we'll have those results available to share. And once we have those flood maps, then we'll move on to the next phase of the project, which is to develop a vulnerability assessment. And that purpose of the vulnerability assessment is to help us understand what is at risk and which areas we need to prioritize. Then finally, the final stage of our CAP OFC project timeline is developing an adaptation plan with specific strategies to reduce flood risk. We anticipate releasing that adaptation plan before the end of 2027. Now, as you see throughout this process, I mean, starting now and moving towards the future, we are going to be undertaking a significant stakeholder engagement, both community and with our industry partners. And that work is about to ramp up. And we hope that everybody here can also participate. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we are currently developing those flood models. And the first is a coastal and stormwater model that will map tidal flooding, as well as the possibility of compound flood events that could occur when there's significant rainfall. The image on the right that you see here shows our modeling area. And you can see it extends quite far inland. So it's not just, I should have put the Port of Oakland boundaries, but it goes inland so we can capture the impact of stormwater to the flood hazard zone areas. This will all result in combined maps that have GIS layers, and it'll show the extent and depth of the flooding that's happening today, as well as with future sea level rise scenarios. Next slide, please. Okay. We're also developing a groundwater model that will help us understand the risk of groundwater rise in the study area. So groundwater poses an additional threat, especially when it occurs near contaminated sites. So our consultant is currently refining a 3D geologic model to give us detailed view of the study area. Then they'll run groundwater flow models that will show existing conditions, as well as different future scenarios with sea level rise and increased precipitation. This will result in GIS layers showing the depth to groundwater and emergent groundwater that reaching the surface. So we'll combine these maps with the coastal and stormwater models to view the aggregate flooding scenarios. This work is still in progress and will hopefully wrap up in the next few months, and we're definitely excited to see what the results are. And I just wanted to kind of underscore that it is important for Port of Oakland to understand the impacts of groundwater intrusion so that we can assess the potential impacts to our existing sites that have groundwater contamination. So we are almost a 100-year organization, and we have, unfortunately, legacy contamination that we've been working with regulatory agencies to clean up. And there are concerns that the contamination could spread from groundwater intrusion. Understanding what these potential impacts are could help the port prepare for any necessary future remediation, or could potentially show that there's also no impact. But we really need to understand what is going on beneath the ground. In addition, the port is also concerned with our subsurface utilities, having vaults, cables, and other subsurface infrastructure that are submerged for long periods of time in groundwater. We didn't design for that, so we just need to better understand what those potential impacts are to our infrastructure could be as well. Next slide, please. So as part of our next steps, we are kicking off our stakeholder engagement as we finalize our modeling work. So the port has partnered with Greenbelt Alliance and several other organizations to seek community input and feedback on the next phases of the project. So Greenbelt Alliance has some great ideas for engaging the stakeholders on issues related to sea level rise, and they'll be hosting community meetings, leading walking tours along the shoreline, tabling at local farmers markets, and really just getting out there to just get that feedback from the community. And that community engagement will continue over the next 2 years, basically to the completion of our project. If you're interested in receiving any project updates, let us know. I'll share with you my fantastic team member, Corey Mann. He's on this call. He's actually the one leading this effort for the Port of Oakland, and who will be able to answer questions after this presentation. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I just quickly, while we continue to plan and adapt to sea level rise and groundwater intrusion at the back end of our climate change plans, we're also taking steps up front to advance our operations towards zero emissions to reduce climate change impacts. So I won't go through all the details of every grant, but we do are transitioning a significant amount of cargo handling equipment to zero emissions, as well as over 400 trucks towards battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell powered. We also partnered with UPS to convert 60 of their box trucks, those delivery trucks, to battery electric. And we also are increasing our renewable energy mix, and we're currently out to bid right now, actually maybe over, for 2 separate zero emission vehicle charging construction projects. This includes installation of solar power arrays, battery energy storage systems, and charging infrastructure at the Seaport campus, all to support our battery electric drayage trucks and cargo handling equipment. Next slide, please. These are, I'm running out of time, so these are just several projects in addition to infrastructure and transitioning towards zero emission equipment. We're also doing studies and initiatives to kind of continue to push ourselves in a zero emission operations here at the Port of Oakland. Next slide, please. And just wanted to highlight there are, to continue ourselves pushing toward and going beyond what's required in regulations. Port has joined 2 voluntary programs in the industry. One is called the Airport Carbon Accreditation Plan that is, as in the name calls it, it's in the airport industry that commits the port to reducing carbon emissions from our airport operations. And then on the seaport side, we are also a member of the Green Marine program that commits us to reducing our environmental footprint overall, beyond air quality, but it also includes stormwater, community engagement, and noise as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight that we're also developing a sustainability management plan. And this is to manage all of our existing sustainability projects and programs that we're already implementing, but it also will challenge us to achieve more and set goals where none exist today for the Port of Oakland. Next slide, please. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Stas.
Colleen, thank you very much. That was very complete, and we will follow up. Your contact person is who?
Corey Mann.
Okay.
I'll send that in an email. But Corey Mann, his email address is cmann. His email address or his last name is shown on his screen right now at portoakland.com.
Okay.
cmann at portoakland.com. But I'll more than happy to answer any questions too.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adrienne Newbold, Assistant Chief Harbor Engineer, Port of Los Angeles. Adrienne, welcome.
Good morning, Stas. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to my esteemed panelists for your excellent presentations. Todd, do you mind bringing up the slides? Okay, thank you. As Stas mentioned, my name is Adrienne Newbold. I'm the Assistant Chief Harbor Engineer for the Port of Los Angeles, and I am here to give you the sea level rise update. Next slide, please. First, I'm going to dive into a little bit about the Port of Los Angeles. We are located here in sunny Southern California. We've survived the storms over the past few days. It's bright, shiny outside. We were founded in 1907, and we are a proprietary department of the City of Los Angeles. We are a state tidelands trust granted in 1911. We are non-taxpayer supported, and our cargo reaches all 435 U.S. congressional districts. By the numbers, we have 4,300 acres of land and 3,200 acres of water, and 43 miles of waterfront with a main channel depth of 53 feet. We have 270 berths and 25 cargo terminals and 116 miles of rail tracks. Last year was one of our best years ever on record, processing 10.2 million containers. Next slide, please. Our major lines of business last year, we had 183 ship calls with cruises. As I mentioned, a record year of containers. Over 1 million passengers visited our LA waterfront, and we have several liquid bulk terminals, dry bulk terminals, roll on, roll off, and recycled material. Next slide, please. Our major economic drivers. The port generates 462,000 jobs in the 5-county Southern California region in Los Angeles, which is about 1 in 19 jobs. And in Los Angeles alone, 1 in 15. Across the United States, that's 1.4 million jobs, and that generates $292 billion worth of cargo value. Next slide, please. We are proud to announce, in partnership with our neighbors, the Port of Long Beach, as part of our Clean Air Action Plan, the Port of Los Angeles Air Emission Inventory, we are compared to the 2005 baseline. We have reduced diesel particulate matter by 90%, sulfur oxides by 98%, greenhouse gases by 18%, nitrous oxides by 73%, all the while having cargo increase by 38%. This is a huge, we've met our goal and beyond, and we're very proud of these numbers. Next slide, please. As most of you know, and it's mentioned a few times earlier today, we have a major goal of zero emission terminal equipment by 2030 and zero emission trucks by 2035. And the port is working with all of our tenants and our sister agency, the Department of Water and Power, to build resilient and redundant infrastructure to our terminals. Next slide, please. Moving on to our sea level rise update. As many of you know, and I've presented here over the past few years, that we've been very proactive in studying sea level rise over the past few decades. We've participated in RANT studies and studies with the City of Los Angeles and Mayor's Office. We did the AB 691 study, which was published in 2018. And I'm proud to mention that we have wrapped up our study, our updated study this year, 2025. So you'll be seeing that soon. And that included our updated sea level rise projections, our updated resiliency strategies, maps through 2150, groundwater impacts, case studies, and a planning and design guideline, which is what I'm the most excited about. Next slide, please. As you can see here, the updated study, we used the projections based on the Ocean Protection Council, which was adopted by the Coastal Commission in November of 2024. And this is consistent with the IPCC AR6 projections. So as you see on the top right, we used the 3 most conservative projections. That's intermediate, intermediate, high, and high. And so we used those for year 2050, 2100, and 2150. The numbers that you see in red here are the inundation maps that we produced. And in the interest of time, I'll just go through a few of them, but I wanted to really show how these updated maps impact the port. Next slide, please. This is our sea level rise projection of 2050. This is mean higher high water plus 1.1 feet of sea level rise, which represents the highest level. And what you see in blue on the map here would represent inundation to the maps. So you see here for 2050, even at the highest level, the port is extremely resilient. Next slide, please. Moving on to year 2100, mean higher high plus 2.8 feet of sea level rise. This is the intermediate scenario. You see in the red circle there, we see some permanent inundation at one of the oldest areas of the port. This right now is where we have our marine oil terminals, and we are currently updating these to all of our seismic code from the State Lands Commission. So anything that's going on here, we are updating to make sure that we are resilient to climate change. Next slide, please. Moving on to the intermediate high scenario, this is 4.5. You see again, kind of the same area, we start to see impacts. And I did want to point out, if you look all the way at the bottom of the map, you start to see some overtopping here of the breakwater. So this is something we'd want to work with in partnership with the Port of Long Beach and the Army Corps of Engineers to start these discussions to look at long-term how we can protect that. Next slide, please. This is for year 2100, the highest level, 6.3 feet. So this is in conjunction with what we saw from the Netherlands, up to 2 meters of sea level rise by the end of 2100. And we do have some impact. So that's why it's crucial that we are planning for it now. Next slide, please. I wanted to put in here also 2150. This is the intermediate high up to 7.7 feet. And this is the first you see. We have one of our container terminals inundation, 2150. So through this, we're incorporating sea level rise into all of our planning now. Next slide, please. In terms of resiliency strategies, with governance, we're considering sea level rise in our policy, planning, and design. We are working with the Coastal Commission on case studies for all new projects that get a coastal development permit for appealable projects. We're considering sea level rise in our capital funded projects and, of course, continuing to monitor and update the plan. In terms of initiatives, we're continuing to coordinate with local, state, and federal and international collaboration, working with all of you, find subject matter experts, looking for funding opportunities, and continuing our advancements in zero emission technology. And in terms of infrastructure, looking at temporary and permanent protection, and looking at elevating and nature-based solutions where we can apply them. Next slide, please. This is hot off the press, our planning guide and consideration, the most I'm excited about, which will be rolling out to our division. And this is in line with the Coastal Commission's policy guidance. This is looking at future plans here, as you saw based on our maps, that it's most imperative to do for new projects, and we're considering this for each new project. Identifying the service life, vulnerability, risk, understanding the sea level rise values and water level, and then of course, operational considerations and adaptive capacity. That's looking at ship to shore interfaces, rail connections, passenger and cruise boarding, and utility and service connections. I could go on and on about this, but I know I'm limited on time. So next slide, please. A few projects, and I mentioned a couple of these last year, but we're very proud of them. This is the award-winning Wilmington Waterfront Promenade, a $77 million project where we raised the promenade of this project to be resilient through 2100 and implemented nature-based solutions. This project has an elevation gain of about plus 21 feet as you go up to the top of the park. Next is our West Harbor development, which is a public-private partnership, and the buildings are raised to and resilient through 2100. And then we are in design for the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach Goods Movement Workforce Training Facility, which has an elevation planned for plus 17 and will be resilient through 2100. Next slide, please. And something that's very exciting, I'm sure you've seen the news, we have an RFP out for Pier 500, which is a new terminal. So if you're interested in applying, it's a 200-acre terminal. And I wanted to put it here just to show that this will absolutely be built resilient to sea level rise for many, many years in the future. Next slide, please. Our key takeaways: the port is continually committed to staying resilient to climate change. Our early planning helps us invest in the future. It's a component of our general plan, and we will continually monitor it and work with all of you. Thank you for your input, and thank you for having me.
Adrienne, thank you very much. Very complete and right in time there. I'm impressed. We are running a little behind, but I want to ask all of you one question, which is, there have been major changes in Washington towards climate change and by definition, sea level rise, with an impact on funding, especially at the Army Corps of Engineers level. Could I ask you very briefly what impact this will have on your ports in terms of the plans that you have proposed? And let me start with the person I know who's asked for the most money, Brad.
Thanks, Stas. Easy question. We don't know the impact of the political environment yet. So in terms of the work that we're doing on a day-to-day basis with the Corps, it's continued. We have a great team of professionals. They continue to work with us. We had a little bit of trouble getting federal funding as part of this fiscal year, but we have a provision in our feasibility cost sharing agreement that governs our study that allows us to advance funding to cover the cost of the federal staff time. So we're taking advantage of that, and we're projecting we're going to hit our final review cycle where it really goes up to headquarters, our study, in January. Now, what comes after that? It will go to the ASA. It will undergo review by OMB on its path to Congress. And so we're not there yet. We don't know what that review is going to yield. We do have contingency plans if we run into trouble. There are ways that we can finish up the study if we decide to do that. More and more local sponsors are deciding to do studies on their own, and we've been part of this, so that's an option for us. The feedback that we've gotten from the staff, the congressional staff, is that it will be a bipartisan bill. So we're hopeful there. So that's probably more of a long-winded answer than you were looking for, but so far we have not felt the impact.
Okay, great. Thank you. Kristine? Are you still-
Thanks, Stas. We have not felt any significant impacts, but the one thing we continue to do is make sure that we are always talking with the district about their work plan numbers that they are remitting to get appropriated. And we're always just watching for the PBUD to come out to make sure that we know that there's adequate appropriations for the dredging of our channel, which is our primary concern.
Okay. Colleen?
Yeah, so similar to Port of Redwood City, we haven't seen any impacts as it relates to this project. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the planning efforts is actually funded by Caltrans, so it's state funding, and we haven't seen any impacts or funding being pulled away as we move forward with our planning efforts. But as far as when we actually develop the strategies and implement those, we'll be monitoring the funding, and who knows, what's going to happen in the next few years. So we'll continue just to monitor those funding opportunities.
Okay. And Adrienne?
Yes, that's the same for the Port of Los Angeles, and we just continue to stay engaged with our representatives from the Army Corps to understand what's going on.
Okay, very good. We have to close this at this point because we are running a little late, and I don't want to get us too late. So I want to thank the panelists for excellent presentations. We're in a kind of strange place here where we don't really know where the next shoe is going to drop, but hopefully the demands and the physics of the climate are going to mandate that we move sooner rather than later. So thank you all very much.